I can be, while you're checking Facebook, I can be reading the narrative of Dallas's stepmother.
Okay. And we're on now
Yeah, I
already.
think
So,
so.
yep.
Okay, guys, I think we were just trying to figure out where we were. And um, Melissa, if you want to, I know you was in the kind of queue or whatever to join the panel. We're always asking for people to join the panel, so feel free to jump back on. Um, so I think that where we were just kind of going through some of um, the narratives and kind of really more focusing on the ones where they had interviewed someone. And so, and then we have Shirley that is saying that she, but I don't, it says they're, Shirley, can you connect your mic and camera? We can't add you until you do that, is what it's saying on the screen. Susan, can you scroll down to where they actually talked to Jennifer Dallas's, I think it was her stepmother?
Yeah, just one sec.
So I think Jennifer Culpepper was or is Dallas Steele's stepmother, and she um, voluntarily went to the police station on April 23rd of 2014. And I think wanted to kind of follow up with the police after Dallas had given her statement. So I'll just read this. It says, on the above date, which was 4/23/2014, Jennifer Culpepper came to the police station to bring a jacket that Whitley Goodman was wearing on the date of Christian Andreacchio's death. Jennifer Culpepper is going to give a true and voluntary statement. This is a true and voluntary statement of Jennifer Culpepper as told and typed by Detective DeMarcus Wilburn. Then Jennifer Culpepper stated, I really don't go into my stepdaughter's room, and I was in my room cleaning up when my stepdaughter came into my bedroom and said, Whitley's jacket is here. She said it was the same jacket that she had on the very same night that Christian died. She said that, what do I need to do? And I said, let me think about it, and I will let you know the next day. The next day, that it's sometimes difficult to read these narratives because they're kind of jumbled. When I called y'all this morning about the jacket, I asked her where the jacket was, and my stepdaughter said it was on her bedpost. And I said, leave it there and don't touch it. And I went and got a garbage bag and put the garbage bag over the jacket and put it in the bag. After I put the jacket in the bag, I put the bag on the floor and came down to the police department. You know, it's really sad that this lady who probably had never been involved in any type of investigation or crime scene or anything, she took more care with trying to
Evidence.
collect this jacket and take it to the police than the actual investigators did.
Yep.
Um, you know, so the police asked the question, "What is your stepdaughter's name?" She responded, Dallas Steele. Why was Whitley's jacket at your house? She responded, because she was staying at our house for about 4 days after Christian's death. I guess she never came back and got it. She was then asked, did Whitley tell you why she wanted to stay at your house instead of going home? She responded, no, and I avoided asking her anything. I remembered that my stepdaughter said that Whitley ran off to the coast because she was scared that Christian's brother thought she had something to do with Christian's death. They then asked, when was the last time you saw Whitley since she left her house? She responded, it was the Sunday a week before Easter Sunday. Is there anything else you would like to add to your statement or any question of me? And she responded, no. And then just said that this was a true statement to the best of her knowledge.
Here's another question.
Yeah. So it says, why do you not want to be mentioned on this case? I have a 4.5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and my husband works on an oil rig, and I'm by myself most of the time. It's also odd that they're both scared of Whitley's. I mean, I assume it's Whitley's family they're scared of. So I don't know what reputation Whitley, or whether they were referring to Frankie or who in that little circle of people. But I would be curious to know exactly why everybody was so kind of scared or intimidated by them. Um, can you scroll up, because I'm not sure. Oh, did Jalen? I see Jalen's name down here, but
Here, let me see. I gotta jump over between screens.
okay.
All right, she's in. Go
Okay.
back.
Jalen, you may have to turn your camera or your microphone on. Well, now your
Hey, I have a microphone on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm gonna go into the other room. My husband and his friend are talking.
Okay. Well, feel free to jump in with any of your thoughts, or because it'd be, interesting to hear what people who, are not closely related to the case,
Yeah.
or to the family, and how, you view things, and how you see the investigation, how it went.
So, first blush overall of the investigation, from just my experience with law enforcement, and I don't know how many people we have in here listening that don't know who I am. I am a forensic scientist, so I kind of work on the back end of everything, seeing the investigation from the end point or middle point. And I am highly disappointed with the fact that it was a 43-minute decision. I have personally had cases that came to me that were ultimately ruled suicide that were investigated for far longer. So yeah, my first impression based off of that. And then in terms of the forensics, I do wish we had a little bit more to look at and go off of with their forensic reporting. I know they've been very tight-lipped about that. I have a personal belief that forensic scientists, we speak for the science, and we are meant to be the unbiased counterpart in this. And transparency is key in that. And if you're not willing to share that work, then what was the point of doing it?
And Jalen, I apologize because just your first name showed up and I didn't connect with that.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Yeah, we have exchanged texts and emails since one of the first episodes that we did a couple of months ago. And Jalen has a lot of knowledge. I'm not going to give a lot of her background just because of her identity. You can share whatever you want to share about that, but she has a lot of training and background in forensics, and
I don't mind sharing a little bit. So specifically, I am a firearm and tool mark examiner. I am the person that would have received that gun and would have done comparisons to the projectile. I am the type of analyst that would have done distance determination, would have done that drop test that they referred to, other things that we could have done, or that I hope was done, is caliber classification of bullets, comparison of bullets to firearms themselves. So, and part of my job is explaining that to a jury. So I'm happy to explain any of the science to anyone. One thing I won't give away is where I'm located, but I'm actually now a lab manager at the laboratory that I work at.
And so, and Susan, your interest too. I mean, Susan has done a lot of research and all background checks, and kind of research on this. But what would be some things that, like, initially should have been done? Like, is that what I've always referred to as investigative 101? I've been told since all this occurred that one of the first things they do is do the test to match the projectile to the gun. Is that correct?
So, as a firearms examiner, I will say part of the policy that I have been under previously does have, I won't say a rule, but has a guideline that suicides are not routinely worked. However, I say that with the caveat of if there is ever any question in it, such as, I don't know, the coroner is saying it's undetermined versus the medical examiner saying it's a suicide, it's something we would absolutely look at. And especially if the district attorney says, hey, we want you to look at this, we absolutely would, even if it was ruled a suicide. In a typical case for any kind of firearms comparison, if I were to receive this case with the projectile, the cartridge case, and the gun, first thing I'm doing is caliber classing the bullet that I've received. So that is taking a measurement of the diameter to determine what caliber class that falls under. And in this situation, it should fall under a 45 because it was a 45 firearm that was found at the scene. And once I'm able to match all those class characteristics, which is the diameter of the bullet, how many lands and grooves it has, the measurements of those lands and grooves, then I can do a microscopic comparison of them to determine whether or not that projectile was fired from that firearm. So in firearms news, I know we've been in the news lately with the Charlie Kirk shooting because the defense tried to claim that a inconclusive answer was an elimination, which is not correct. That is one of the reasons why suicides typically aren't worked in a forensics laboratory, is because we don't want to give false hope of it was inconclusive, we don't know, and the family may take that as an exclusion. But like I said, in this situation where it's an undetermined or it's a questionable one, absolutely do everything possible to analyze all of the evidence. The other thing would be looking at that cartridge case. So the cartridge case that was found should have all of the same markings that the firearm does. So in that process, I'm going to test fire the firearm. I'm going to collect bullets and cartridge cases from the firearm that are my knowns. And I'm going to look at them to the questioned bullet and cartridge case that was found at the scene and determine whether or not that firearm could have fired those bullets and cartridge cases. I have not test fired many 1911s. I have not test fired many of this specific firearm. But I will say, like, a firearm that is well produced and very clean typically has really good reproducible marks that I can look at. In the process of that, I'm also going to do a functionality test on the firearm. So I'm going to make sure the firearm's functioning properly. There's no kinks. There's no issues with it. And in this situation where we're not sure of abuse, I'm actually a little confused why they did an abuse test in this situation. From what I've heard from the case file and from the investigation, I don't feel an abuse test was appropriate here. And that abuse test is going to be called, it's going to be called a drop test. I think yes, they did do a drop test, right?
Yes, they did do a drop test and said it did what it's supposed to do. Like it
right. So basically what a drop test is exactly what it sounds like. We drop it from a certain height and see if the gun goes off. And clearly in this situation, dropping the firearm does not cause it to go off. I know another test they did was that trigger pull test. Mm-hmm. I personally am not, I don't know where a trigger pull would have been necessarily helpful. Having a lightened trigger pull is not illegal. It is not a violation of a statute. And in this situation, we saw where the trigger pull was not lightened. It was not modified whatsoever. It was within the normal poundage that you would see from that type of firearm. And basically all a trigger pull test does is you have a weight that is going to go against the trigger, and it's going to tell you, okay, at this many pounds, the trigger will release the firing pin. So a normal trigger pull, I would say, is somewhere between 7 and 8 pounds. And that would be the equivalent of lifting a gallon of milk with your finger. Again, not sure what pertinence they had for that, but they did it. It passed. It was within expected range. The thing I think definitely needed to be done in this situation is a distance determination test. So, distance determination is the range where the muzzle is from the target, and that can tell you how far away a shot was. There's chemical testing that can be done, but there's also visual testing that can be done. And the visual testing, the visual look from the autopsy can kind of give you an idea of what distance that gun was when it was fired. That is the big one that I feel like should have been done that I have not seen a report that they did do.
Now, as far as doing these tests, is this something that y'all can, and this may be state by state, so it may be different in Mississippi than your state, but do you have to have basically the equivalent of a doctor's order? Like you have to have an investigator to request the test to be done, or can the lab just do the test just based on their own, curiosity or their own feelings that this test should be done?
That is something that I would say will vary from lab to lab. It depends on the laboratory policy. However, I have seen where most of the time your forensic scientists have good working relationships with investigators to call them up and say, hey, we found this with a firearm. We think we need to do this kind of testing. The medical examiner can say, hey, I think we need this kind of testing done. Typically, the way it happens is that an investigator will submit the evidence, request specific types of testing, and then as the analyst goes along, if they find another type of testing, like we'll use an example of if I got a firearm in that has a filed off serial number and the investigator only requested comparisons, I might give them a call and be like, hey, do you want me to try to restore the serial number as well? And just get some input from them. And unless there is a definite no or a reason why they don't want it done, I'm going to run that kind of analysis to go ahead and just cover all of our bases.
But could you, I guess, do you get in trouble if, like, this comes in? Let's just say if Christian's, this, was in your lab where you work, and the investigators did not really submit any testing, but you, as the lab says, really and truly, we need to match this projectile with this gun. We need to, and then, is that something that you would get in trouble for if you just kind of ran the test, or you have to kind of get the permission, I guess you'd say, from the investigator? Yes.
So for accreditation purposes, we do have to have permission from the person that is submitting the evidence to run testing. It depends on how your relationship. I have had where I can send an investigator an email saying, I'm going to run this type of testing. If you do not want me to proceed, please respond within 24 hours. And that covers my basis of, okay, you didn't respond in 24 hours. I'm going to proceed with testing. But like I said, that kind of just depends on your analyst and investigator relationship, where can I send an email to this investigator that do have it written into policy that the analyst is the ultimate decision on testing protocol. I don't know what the laboratory's policy is here.
And then another question is, as far as the way the actual projectile or bullet, whatever you want to call it,
yes,
was a black Talon. So again, kind of things that people told me when, this really kind of came to light, there was more public interest, was that it didn't mushroom. It didn't appear to look like it should have looked.
Okay.
Is that true or not true? From your experience.
From my experience, I believe what they're referring to is the fact that it's a jacketed hollow point, which basically means that the tip of it is hollowed out and is designed to expand or quote unquote mushroom. Sometimes we'll call it pedaling, mushrooming, flowering. And it's just that expansion of that jacketed hollow point. I'm never one to say how a bullet will behave. I have seen bullets that have been completely shredded from just going through a piece of cloth. I have seen bullets that have been completely intact after passing through multiple layers of material. So it just kind of depends on the circumstances, the situations, what's going on. But I wouldn't call it a red flag if it didn't mushroom out.
I'm trying to think of all of my, Susan, you have any questions? I'm trying to think of all of my ballistic type questions. While she's
Have you?
We kind of did a surprise here.
yeah, this wasn't planned. I didn't know she was going to jump on here. So
I didn't realize I was jumping into the actual video. I thought I was just jumping on to watch it.
I do have a question on the. Have you actually seen the bullet?
I don't believe I have. I've seen some photos from the crime scene, very out of focus, that I could not really get a good look at. Oh, I take that back. We did share those photos that were on the Facebook page. I have seen some of those, which brought up some questions that Ray and I've spoken about.
Yeah. So the bullet, as you talked about the mushrooming and pedaling, only like one of the petals actually opened. The rest didn't.
Like I said, it can be one way or another. It could have just caught on that one particular petal and pulled it out. I've seen some bullets do some crazy things when it hits certain types of mediums.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this would necessarily be in your, fall under ballistics, but it kind of goes back to, when they presented Christian's case to the grand jury, they showed this video of, and the purpose of showing it was to say, because, there's a lot of discussion about, well, the scene was too clean. There wasn't blood spatter.
Right.
And so they showed this video. I don't know if you've heard us talk about this before.
I have, yes.
And I actually contacted, it was from San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. I did a public records request. The Attorney General's office, all they did was pull it off YouTube and did not actually get it from the Sheriff's Department. So I contacted them, got what I could, what they would give me as far as information. Because I would, their whole point was, this is the same gun, the same type of bullet. You don't see, he shoots himself in the head, obviously close range. There's very little blood spatter. One kind of thing of that is, it's like my son, who's, real techie. I did not inherit any of that. He was like, well, that was back, I can't remember the year, but it was like 20 something years ago or ever how long. And he said, soul and all, it's not as clear of a picture, and you really don't know if there was blood spatter or not, because the image is so grainy and everything. But in the information that I received, number one, they never said that it was the same type of gun or the same bullets. That was not in the video. And then even in the information that I received, it was not in any of the reports. So I don't think anybody can necessarily say that it was an identical situation. But
and I would argue too that you can say it's the same type of gun. It's not the same gun. You can say it's the same type of ammunition. It's not the same ammunition. It's not the same situation. It may not be the same bullet track. It may not be the same trajectory of the bullet. I feel it completely unfair to try and compare situations like that. It's, to me, apples and oranges. Every scene is different. Every case is different. And I find it very unreasonable to try to say, well, here's one with the same type of gun and the same type of bullet and the same type of situation. It's not the same situation.
Well, what they didn't, and they probably don't know this, because again, you can't tell this from the video, and they didn't take the correct step, in my opinion. If you're going to show it to a grand jury, you should have actually procured it from the law enforcement agency. But what they didn't tell, and it kind of helped in another, when I say helped, I mean, it kind of like backed up what we've said about this whole, if Christian had shot himself, like leaning over the bathtub or whatever, it would have shattered that fiberglass bathtub or whatever. But going back to this video of this shooting, it actually went through the wall, traveled across the room that was next door, and embedded into the wall on the far side of the room. And so, I mean, I felt like that kind of proved our point of, okay, let's say it was the same gun or the same type of gun. It was the same type of bullet. It's just not feasible the way they said this bullet, didn't tear anything up, didn't go through a wall, do anything. And this was a very, cheaply made apartment complex. And you're not in a police station in an interrogation room where I would think they had pretty substantial walls in between the rooms. So and
even if not, I mean, I agree. The trajectory issue is, like I said, it's an issue. Bullets travel straight. That's what I'll say. Unless they are impeded, unless they are redirected by a material that is stronger than the velocity at which they're traveling, bullets travel straight with a degree of drop from gravity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and back to, I think you said when you were talking about the drop test or the abuse test, I think it's how you referred to it. And you said you didn't really know why they did that, just kind of for background information. I think the reason why they did that test was because Whitley, in like her second time to talk to them, kind of came back in and said, hey, I really don't think he meant to kill himself. I think he had the gun modified. Well, no, that was the trigger pull. I'm sorry. That was a trigger pull.
That would make more sense for the trigger pull in that situation.
The drop
test makes no sense to me.
Well, the drop test came about because MBI was in their report said that the way that the gun ended up wedged on the wrong side and between his thigh and the bathtub was because when he dropped the gun then bounced up and was.
See, and I would even argue though that is not the purpose of a drop test. The purpose of a drop test is to determine if when the firearm is dropped, will it discharge? So in my opinion, that would not even be an appropriate test to perform to interpret that kind of result. I've never heard of that being done previously. But yeah, a drop test is mainly to determine whether or not when you drop the firearm, will it go off?
Well, and Susan, correct me, I may be getting all my different tests confused, but it was also because they was trying to prove that whether the gun malfunctioned, and that's how it ended up not being cocked or whatever. Yeah. That it basically, malfunctioned, and that's why it was not safety or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, basically none of the tests proved any of their theories. And
like we discussed before about the whole decocking situation, the amount of physical manipulation that firearm requires to manually decock it. That particular firearm does not have a decocking switch on it, which is what you would typically see in a situation with a gun that is decocked after being fired or loading another round into the chamber. This firearm in particular does not have that decocking mechanism, which should have all been in that firearms report when they did a functionality test of the firearm.
Is there anything else, Susan, that we are nagging questions we've had?
And you know where to find me if you have any that come up afterwards. Just let me know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I know you said you've never had a lot of like personal experience with that type of gun, but another thing was, I think NBI and the Attorney General's office was trying to say that this gun had a kind of a reputation of malfunctioning. But I never could find
Right.
any research of that. I mean, any data that supported that. If anything, it supported the opposite, that it was a very kind of well respected firearm
Hmm.
that did not malfunction very often. And I actually spoke to several gun collectors who, they owned the gun, they owned, probably hundreds of
Hmm.
guns. And they were like, no, we've never known this gun to
Right.
malfunction. So,
Like I said, I've never seen one malfunction personally. I don't have a lot of experience with this particular firearm. I have dealt with other 1911 models previously that have all reliably functioned and were very reliable firearms from what I know of them. Like I said, with this particular firearm brand, I'm not as familiar with it, but I could definitely do some research into it and get back with you on that.
well, and don't go to any trouble, but yeah, I was just curious if you had ever heard, oh, well, yeah, I've heard people say it's unreliable or there's an issue with,
No.
whatever, some mechanism of the gun. I'm definitely not a gun person, so I don't really know the right terminology to use. But
And, and I've
so,
never seen it popping up in my forums stating any kind of issues with them or, hey, be on the lookout for this, be on the lookout for that. Because we do have forums that we share information on to let other examiners know, hey, this gun has a malfunction we've seen to be wary of if you are test firing this firearm, just as a safety precaution. And that particular firearm has not crossed my radar.
oh, I have another question. This doesn't have
I do
anything to do
too
with firearms.
after
Oh, yeah, well, go
you.
ahead, Susan. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I had a question about, and I'm not sure if you can answer it or not, but from my understanding with that gun, um, that there should be like a really large exit wound. And in my opinion, the exit wound is
Mhm.
smaller than the entrance wound.
So that's something I'd be interested in looking at for sure. Um, it's it's a little subjective. It is definitely on medical examiner for entrance exit, how that works. I will say when you have a contact wound, sometimes there can be something called stellate tearing that causes the wound to appear larger from where the entry is.
Mm.
For as far as entry and exit, that would be something more a medical examiner would have to answer. I'm not I'm not able to examine those types of
Yeah.
large exit wound, small exit wound, anything like that.
Yeah, because my opinion, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but in my opinion, the way the gun had to be held was more
Hmm.
like a gangster, on like a gangster would on somebody's head. Like just the angle, the way it was, or it would have been impossible, in my opinion, which is nothing. Um, that his arms, his muscles, he wouldn't have been able to get his arm in the position that it
Hmm.
was. It was just
And
really
that might be
tight.
something that that's something more of a medical examiner would be able to make a determination on. I can certainly look and see from my studying what I've seen of gunshot wounds to kind of look at the trajectory from the autopsy report. I have done that sometimes too when we're looking at distance determination cases.
Or if you,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
if
I've
you have a forensic pathologist that you hang out with that wants to come on here anonymously, we don't give away his whatever, that we can ask all these questions to.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if I see somebody that's willing, I'll definitely get them a
So
ring.
we'll keep it anonymous. They don't have to say their name or show their
Right.
face. I mean, just because it's really more just questions that we've never, or I know Susan's had a lot. I've had a lot, and the forensic pathologist that we use, Dr.
Mhm.
Arden, there was a layer of like he did not communicate with me directly. He went through our attorney, which
Right.
I understand
Okay.
that, because I know the whole thing is if there's something they don't want to have to, like, if he had thought Christian committed suicide and he didn't want to have to be the one to tell me that, he would tell the attorneys
Right.
and the attorneys so that he didn't have to deal with, distraught family members and things. So I understand that. So all of my communication, per his policy was kind of secondhand through my attorney, which not that I don't trust what she said, but there was just a lot of things that like really just, just really more not curiosity. That's a bad word to use, but just little nagging questions. And you hated to just bombard him and the attorney with this long list of questions.
Right.
So you just hit the high points, and so it's just, really, and then you research things and Google things and chat GPT things, and you don't know if you're getting the right information. And so, you just try to talk to people. But no, my question was, what is the policy tip? And again, I know every state's different, but what is the policy where you are, related to talking to family, or like in our situation where the case, I mean, it's 12 years, what is the typical protocol? Y'all have no contact, or you can't give out any information, or how do y'all handle that?
Yes, that is correct. So most forensics laboratories, especially those that are accredited through particular accreditation bodies, we follow ISO 17025 or 17020. And basically, that is an international standard that if you're accredited by that standard, you have to follow that standard to a T. And ISO, I believe both of them, 17025 and 17020, have policies of confidentiality. Because the work we are doing is in a legal sector and is being brought to us by investigators, we are bound by confidentiality and not able to speak with family members, especially if it's a case that is either active or not been adjudicated yet. All of our, and again, this is a policy thing at this point where any communication has to go through legal. It has to go through a lawyer to make sure that we are not, that we're not going to violate our standards of confidentiality by those ISO standards, which is standardization across the board.
But as far as like even, which I know that we're in a kind of a hopefully unique situation. I hope there's not a lot of families out there that have, kind of had to go through all the hurdles we've gone through, or beating their head against the wall. But in our situation where it has been a long time, and they do, the case for all intents and purposes is closed. They still have it ruled as a suicide. I've been told that really people are, kind of people I've talked to is like, I'm surprised they haven't called you and just said, here's the gun, because, it's been this long. If they do have the case closed, the property should be returned to the family. And so my fear, because they've never done that, is of course that evidence is going to go missing. And so like even the right for them to tell the family that we still have it,
unfortunately, that confidentiality agreement is pretty airtight, where forensic examiners cannot speak to the family. We are bound by only speaking to whoever submitted that evidence to us to be processed, unless we are given permission to speak to a family member. So in order for the forensic scientist to work the case to let you know whether that evidence is there or not, it would have to go through the investigator. I will say it depends on the laboratory. A lot of times the laboratory is not the one that actually maintains the evidence after the fact. It's sometimes sent back to the agency that submitted it to them. It just kind of depends on what the policy is for that particular laboratory.
Well, the last time I was given information about where the DNA, the gun, and the projectile was. Of course, it's been several years ago. And it was at the crime lab. And we had requested, the attorney had requested that the crime lab maintain it or retain it, and also not to destroy anything. But we got no response from that. And I know that from my understanding, the crime lab is kind of at the mercy of the investigator. If the investigator calls and says, I want this sent back to us, the crime lab really doesn't have the authority to say, well, no, we're keeping it, is my understanding.
That's going to be dependent on policy, I would say. That's going to vary from policy. I will say, I know if I were to receive something from a lawyer that says I can't return this, I would definitely have my legal team look over it and see legally where we are with that. And I personally would not be inclined to move it around if I was told not to. But again, it's a policy thing. The policy may be that they are to retain cases. The policy may be that they are to retain evidence. I'm not 100% sure what their particular policy is.
And right now, that's kind of where I am, is just trying to verify that any of those 3 items has not been destroyed, and if they have, I do know through a public records request, I should be able to find out who kind of gave who gave the authorization. Yeah, to destroy it. I would think that, and I know I've seen in a lot of previous cases too, where that order of destruction, it has to go through so many different court orders prior to that. I don't think it would happen this way here. I feel like it would be one phone call. I feel like call the crime lab and say, get rid of that DNA. Right. I feel like there would be people, because really and truly, of all the agencies I dealt with in this, really the crime lab was the only agency that I didn't have a gripe with, I guess you'd say, or how. Right. I mean, I do feel like they were caught between a rock and a hard place. And yes. Where nobody told us, this is my opinion. They, I think, wanted to help me. They wanted to make sure the evidence was maintained, and but of course, they're lab. I don't know what their titles are, but they're the lab people. They're not. They've got someone over them, and they definitely knew my concern of that something would happen, especially especially to the DNA. But so anyway, I was just curious. I didn't know what the actual policy, or if it did fall under HIPAA or anything like that, as far as not being able to speak. Because I guess, the flip side of it is, and I totally understand why they don't want all these family members calling up there saying, hey, do you have, it's no telling how many pieces of evidence they have and how many cases there or whatever. So they don't have the time or the whatever to do that. But, I also feel like from a taxpayer standpoint, that there should be some process for like a family in our situation, for there to be some transparency to where, and again, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. I'm just saying, again, this is another area that I feel like, unless you've been on my side of things, you don't really understand, as far as that, the frustration and the kind of powerlessness that you feel when you can't even get anybody to just tell you. Just send me an email saying, we have it here, it's still retained at the crime lab. I don't have any information other than we still have it. And not necessarily someone who is working in the lab, but a higher, I've emailed, Right. And I would say that it would definitely be an email to their legal team that I feel like their legal team would, I would hope, would look into it and see if they can release that information to you, especially if there is a
order involved saying, hey, don't destroy this evidence. Let us know, like, can we get it back or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, that is kind of, you got any thought of anything else, Susan?
I'm not sure. I mean, like 3 a.m. I'm sure I'll think of something.
Okay, Jalen, you can reconvene and like give us a couple of weeks, and then you can jump back
Yeah.
on. And
I'll be here.
or if anybody who listens or sends in any questions, then you can answer some of those questions.
Absolutely. Send them my way. You know where to find me. And then if you want to pass my phone number along to Susan to send me those 3 a.m. questions, we're not that far apart in time zones, so it wouldn't be an issue. Just let me know.
Okay, I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Anytime.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's a lot of good information, and you can tell you're very knowledgeable. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I try hard.
Have a good weekend.
All right, you too.
Well, that was good information and kind of unexpected.
Yeah. She knows a
um,
lot, so I wish I was prepared for that.
Well, she can come back on in a couple of weeks, and then maybe we can have some follow-up questions. And people who, I know a lot of people watch this later,
Yeah,
and
afterwards.
so they'll have some questions that they can ask. So let's see. Let's get back to, is this another?
Yeah, where she talks about the jacket.
But this is actually with Dallas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this
Yes.
is back. Okay. And so this is about 10. I think the other was on the 14th, maybe, when she came in, and now it's 4:24. I may not be remembering correctly, but I think it was a little bit of time between when they spoke to her stepmother and then they spoke to her. And so it's just where says Dallas came to the police department to talk to detectives about the jacket that Whitley was wearing the night Dallas picked her up from the police department. Dallas stated that the jacket was left in her bedroom on a hook where she hung all her jackets up. Dallas stated that she was moving some of her clothes and Whitley's jacket fell down on the ground, and she told her mom that Whitley left her jacket here. I asked Dallas why she thought to bring the jacket to the police station. Dallas replied, because of all the rumors she was hearing, she thought that she needed to bring the jacket to the police station. Dallas also stated that Whitley told her that she had gunshot residue on her hands because Whitley supposed to have went shooting the night before with Matt Miller and Jet Miller and some more guys. I don't know that we will ever really know who all was there, if there was whatever happened that night, because and some more guys. So not Zach Tat, you know what I'm saying? That would have been another guy. Everybody else has referred to, and another guy, but she says some more guys. So I don't know. Maybe she just said that randomly, but who knows? Says Detective Wilburn talked to Dallas about Whitley's spending habits after Christian's death, and she advised that she didn't know. I asked Dallas, did Whitley act like she came into some money? And Dallas replied that she didn't unless she got the money from when she sold her iPad. Dallas was very bitter about this iPad. I talked to Dallas about Whitley going out of town, and she advised that the only place that she knew of was Alabama for 2 weeks. Dallas stated that she heard that she went to the coast because she was scared of Christian's family, but she wasn't sure. I asked Dallas, did she know if Whitley ever went to Vicksburg? And Dallas replied that she didn't know. Detective Wilburn talked to Dallas about the night she picked Whitley up from the police station. Dallas stated that on the way home, she told Dallas that she had gunshot residue on her hands from shooting with Matt Miller, and she was holding Christian's body when the police and the paramedics came into the house. Dallas stated that Whitley said that the paramedics had to pull her off of Christian's body when they got there, but Dallas advised that Whitley did not have any blood on her clothes. I asked Dallas, did Whitley say she changed clothes any during that time? And Dallas replied, Whitley did not say that she changed clothes. I asked Dallas, has she heard any rumors about what happened the evening of Christian's death? Dallas replied, I've heard that Whitley was downstairs and she heard a gunshot and she went up upstairs and got a cigarette from Christian's pocket and went back downstairs while Dylan called the police. I told Dallas if she remembers anything else to let us know, and Dallas replied, I will. For people who don't know, the whole thing with the iPad is that Dallas told Whitley she had to leave because she stole her iPad. And when Whitley was staying with her for that period of time. And so to me, the interesting thing about that is that Whitley did have an iPad that she used a lot. And the iPad was not found at the apartment. So I've always wondered what happened to her iPad and that she stole Dallas's, I assume, to be able to have one, because I still think that she sat there on that iPad and put messages on Christian's phone through, being whatever to the iCloud.
Yeah,
and I think that she wanted to get rid of the iPad so that I mean, I don't know if that shows up on an iPad if you did that, but I mean, I think that's why she got rid of her phone and her the iPad, because both of them mysteriously were never found. I mean, there was not a broken iPhone found in the apartment. There was not bits and pieces of an iPhone in the apartment.
And she never used it again.
Right. Yeah. So I just think that she got rid of it, intentionally. But okay.
And also this part where Dallas said that the paramedics had to pull Whitley off and all that.
Yeah.
That's not true, because wasn't she like downstairs smoking a cigarette when they got there?
Well, that's just another kind of deviation of her story. I mean, that was always the problem, I think, with Whitley, as far as her ever being deposed or having to be even put on a witness stand, was she told too many people different things. I mean, even Matt, Matt says that she told him
different things.
Different things about where Christian was shot and this kind of thing. And then there's just multiple other stories. So she never could really stay consistent. But I also think that Whitley felt protected for whatever reason. I know that, she told the Crime Watch Daily, the interviewer called her. I mean, actually picked up the phone and called her and said, I think they were upset because Crime Watch was trying to get a hold of the arrest warrants and how they were worded and what they were being charged with. And, Whitley called her and said, it doesn't really matter because nothing will ever happen to me. And so I have my opinion of why she felt that way, but for whatever reason, she felt very arrogant and very protected that nothing would ever happen, which, I mean, I guess nothing ever did happen to her.
Well, I think she had something on somebody.
Yeah.
Possibly.
So anyway, where are we? Is there any more? I can't remember how this goes as far as people I think that's when they start doing the this is Matt's do we want to get into Matt's?
I don't know. His is kind of long, isn't
and then we have that audio too.
Yeah.
His, because just as a, I guess, preface we can stop here, but then next week we can pick up with him. But he first talked to the investigators we had, and then basically gave them a kind of interview or a statement. And then they said, well, hey, you need to come talk to the police department, the investigators, police department. And so then they basically went with him, I think, and took him over to the police department. And then they got an official statement from him, which I thought was kind of an odd
way to have that happen.
Yeah. I mean, at least they did interview him, but it was an odd. So part of the interview is taped, which we wouldn't play the entire thing because it's like over an hour long. But and a lot of it is just them kind of building rapport and BSing, and
Yeah.
pretty much. But we did have that and actually have the audio. But again, the investigators did that. The police did not. When he went to the police, they did not audio anything. They typed it up and he signed it like they did with the others. But we'll have that audio and stuff and then start with that because like I said, his will be kind of lengthy.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Susan, for taking the time.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
See you later.
Okay.